So their arguments against the judgment of reason either have no weight in them at all, or else depend upon a scandalous and untrue suggestion, as if the Protestants made reason the judge in a Socinian sense. So their arguments against the spirits being judge, I do proceed, I doubt, from a wilful mistake, for in their learned writers it cannot be ignorance, as if the Protestants submitted Scripture and reason, and all to the judgment of the Spirit in themselves, in an enthusiastic notion, which is so far from being true, that they try and judge of the Spirit by the Word, according to apostolical prescription. This being premised, I come now to treat with my captain, and weigh his arguments, that have any color or appearance of truth in them. And first he argues against reasons being the judge of controversies, concerning which let me be bold to say thus much, that the Papists themselves do make reason judge of controversies, as far as the Protestants do, though both the one and the other tie up this judge to a rule. If it be said the Protestants make the reason of every particular man judge, which indeed they do, in the sense forementioned and for their own actions, so do the Papists make the reason of the Pope or a council the judge. For when they say the Pope or council is the judge of controversies, I would know what it is in them, if not their reason, which is the judge, as it is their reason which examineth and heareth and considereth. So sure it is the same reason which concludeth and judgeth, so that the question between the Papists and Protestants is not whether reason be the judge, but whether the reason of particular persons or the reason of the Pope or council. The arguments which he urgeth against the judgment of reason are so irrational that it is sufficient confutation to mention them. First, saith he, reason must submit to the judge. It is not the judge. Answer. It is true, supreme judge it is not, but subordinate and tied to rule. Protestants assert no more. Secondly, the judge must be infallible, but reason is fallible. Ergo, answer, the major is a pitiful petitito principii. They that helped him to make his book will tell him what it means. Thirdly, if reason were judge, a man might please God without faith, for reason would teach us sufficiently how to please God. Answer. The same argument will overthrow his church. If the church be the judge, then a man may please God without faith, for the church teacheth us sufficiently how to please God. Fourthly, if reason be judge, we must not believe what we do not understand. Answer. Non sequitur. For this judge is tied up to a law and rule which commands us to believe what we do not understand. But I am sick of such woeful arguments, though the poor captain hath no better, and therefore I will quit that work, and come to that which is more material, that is, to try whether he hath any better against the Scripture, and here also I shall do his cause that right, as with him, to take into consideration what is said by Mr. Cressy in his Exomologesis, which I am the more willing to do, because if the popish cause have any strength in it, and if the doctrine of the Scripture alone being judge and rule of controversies be untrue and indefensible, as they pretend it is, we may expect the demonstration of it from a man of his wit and learning and experience in the controversy, as having thoroughly considered all pretensions and arguments of both parties, and taken in the advice of the most famed doctors of the Romish Church. But I must not dissemble that I was woefully disappointed in the perusal of Mr. Cressy's piece, and whereas I expected something solid and substantial, or at least very plausible, which I might have some ground in charity to believe might give at least a color for his change, I find little in him worthy of consideration, but what hath already received satisfactory answers. Yet, because the cause affords no better arguments, I shall briefly consider what he and the captain and his assistants deliver in this matter. That the Scripture is not the only rule of faith and judge of controversies is the proposition they attempt to prove, and their arguments are those which follow. Argument 1. Scripture cannot be this judge and rule, because it did not answer its end, for they that own this judge disagree among themselves. Everard's Epistle, page 33. Scripture doth not reconcile them. Thus Cressy, by this rule, it is impossible that ever controversy should be ended. Section 2, chapter 4, N1. Answer. Scripture might be, as really it was, designed, instituted, and ordained for the ruling of men's faith and the judging and deciding controversies, though through the depravedness of men this end might not be obtained. If this argument have any weight in it, I may upon the same ground argue thus, Preaching of the gospel is not instituted for the salvation of the world, because it doth not answer its end, but proves to many a savour of death. Or the law of God was not instituted by God for a rule of life, because it doth not obtain its end, and men will not be ruled by it. In a word, let it be observed, if this argument prove anything, it proves what the very papists deny, that the Scripture is not so much as a part of the rule, neither of faith nor manners, so still, according to the present argument, it doth not answer its end. For there is no one controversy in faith which Scripture alone decides, so as to silence all differences, which is a thing pretended necessary to a judge of controversies. For the further discovery of the impertinency and vanity of this argument, however, it is their Goliath which they boast most of, I shall offer them this dilemma, relating to that power of ending all differences among Christians which they suppose was necessary for, and by Christ committed to the judge of controversies. Either, I say, that power is absolute, unconditional, and effectual, and if so, there could be no heresies, schisms, or differences in the Christian world, which we see as most false, or it is a conditional power sufficient of itself for the ending of differences, though frustrable and impedible in its effects by the ignorance or perverseness of men, which is the real truth. And in this sense, the Scripture may be judged. That is, there is enough in it said and clearly delivered, by which all controversies might be ended, if men would be humble, studious, and self-denying. And in the former sense, the Church of Rome is no judge of controversies. Peradventure it will be said that all men are bound to submit and hearken to all the decrees of the Church of Rome, and when they do so submit, it is an effectual mean to end all differences. In the very same manner, and upon far better grounds, I say of the Scripture, that all are bound to submit and hearken to its counsels and decrees, and when they do so, it will effectually end all controversies. If it be further said that the Church hath a power of coercion to compel dissenters to submit, I answer either that coercion they speak of is spiritual by church censures and excommunication, etc., or civil by corporal penalties, death, etc. If they understand that of civil coercion, that is not at all necessary nor intrinsical to an ecclesiastical judge of controversies, otherwise the apostles, who had not this civil power, nay, Christ himself, who denies that he was judge or ruler, should not be such a judge, and the Church for the first 300 years had no judge of controversies. Nay, the papists themselves, in pretense at least, adjudicate this from the Church, and refer it wholly to the civil power. If they speak of a scriptural coercion, then the Scripture hath such a power of inflicting spiritual penalties upon its violators and condemners, such as obduration and ejection from the presence of God, and such excommunication, as the other is but a shadow of it.